All right, how's it going, everybody? So, just want to pose a question to you all. If racism is solely based on race, and that's how we identify someone as a racist, as somebody who believes in the inferiority or in the need to judge others on the basis of their genetic heritage, basically. Um, if we think of race and racism as being based off of bloodline, genetics, based off of, heritage, then wouldn't today's issue over illegal immigration be more of an issue over colonization? That is, the action or process of settling among and establishing control over the indigenous people of an area. Now, racism is prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against someone of a different race based on the belief that one's own race is superior, or the belief that all members of each race possess characteristics or abilities specific to their race, especially so to distinguish it as inferior or superior to another race or races. When you're judging these two and comparing them and contrasting them to today's situation, you know that in today's society, especially in America, there is a cultural pride and value that many minority families place on their origins and family abroad. I noticed specifically with the Hispanic families that I grew up with. They consistently maintain a very pro-Mexican and very desirous feeling towards their homeland. But they acknowledged the problems there, and they were very proud of their American heritage as well. So there's a trade-off. They were those who tried to assimilate in. But what we have today is it's coupled, this foreign patriotism, or international patriotism, I guess, is coupled with a very real desire to not assimilate with the current citizens of America. And they may call this white culture or European culture or Western society. But it shows us that there's a certain cultural and social behavior and beliefs that underlie this whole mentality. And when you start looking at it, this idea of white culture, you realize that Europeans are a mutt race. They are several tribes that have bonded together over the centuries in order to create the European identity under Western society. But they are actually pretty genetically unique. People in the Alps can be quite unique compared to the people in Italy. People who are in the Netherlands are different from those in Britain. You have mingling of genetic lines, but for the most part, you can actually find some very interesting differences depending on where people live in Europe. That's true in some other places in the world, but for the most part, that's only in isolated areas. Once you start getting to these societies like in Asia, Middle East, and Africa, where there's a large amount of mixture space, you end up finding a lot of people are interrelated far more than you would think. Now, of course, every group of races has a branch off, because really what a race is the cohabitation of multiple tribes. So America could actually be a race. To be American is actually to be a race. You are a race of that people who derive their origins, their heritage, and their genetic identity from their history of being generated in the American continent, which is the true of any person whose family line has been here at least for 2 to 3 generations. So there's a unique genetic identity to Americans that is different from Europeans and the rest of the world. We don't learn about this, but that's something you can find in the studies. Going back to what's important, though, is there's hardly one race when found in America, but we are one race, and that that study, but there's basically a study that was showing that had immigration policies not changed in the 70s, there would have been so much intergenerational marriage in America that most races would have become homogenized in America into one American identity. So compared to a region like America, the influx of certain South American cultures is solely due to the reasons and justifications that are, by definition, racist in origin, because they are not moving here to assimilate into American culture. There is a large percentage of them that are only coming in to receive the benefits or to express their culture within the boundaries of America or to turn America into their culture. I think part of this has to do with propagandization of the left and the preference of the left for catering to those who are migrants and giving them favors for votes, basically buying them off. And I think that actually would change should the right actually start being able to attribute and be able to deliver better aid to those people for first reforming immigration policy, but then working more social and commercial means to try to work and change the economy of Mexico and of the southern border to generate more profit in that area so that those who come will be able to settle in that area and come over and have enough time to process. I think settling down south and creating a city in a way would actually be better for the whole area. But I think in order to do that, you have to have the wall. It would be just a better security measure. And one would say that you could draw similarities to the Berlin Wall, but there's one thing that we know about the Berlin Wall. They were not sparsely populated. How much area do we have down there compared to the population? If we look at that, we can utilize some more of that space for better means of irrigation and better means of generating crops in that area. And I also think that general construction would just help. We have places like Las Vegas, which are generally built in the desert and shouldn't exist. I don't think we have ways of disrupting the environment enough in order to generate fucking rain in Texas, the fucking deepest parts of northern Mexico. I don't know. Getting back to, again, what's important. When you look at the people coming over and how the left utilizes them, it is based off of race. And it is a racist notion that the left uses in order to push their agenda and their policies and their legislative reforms. The backlash of Americans against illegal immigration is clearly stated as based on the replacement theory of politics, this idea of international carpetbagging. Now, carpetbagging is usually derogatory and refers to politicians who move to different states, districts, or areas to run for office despite their lack of local ties or familiarity. They don't come from the region. They come there merely to change that environment to the interest of another group. Yet in this case, when we apply it to the relocation and displacement of politically viable citizens favorable towards a regime or cause by a foreign populace seeking to wield legislative power over them through promising support to rival politicians, then you really see the reality of today's situation. This is what the left does. They use these immigrants to wield them politically against politically viable citizens who do not support leftist agendas. We don't want vaccines. They wield minorities in order to force the other group to obey. You could say that that's racism, but I honestly am going to make a compelling argument that it's actually the reverse, and that it's in a lot of ways gaslighting by groups, by a minority within a majority, in order to turn a part of that majority into a minority. Because again, if you start thinking of nations as those who have chosen to assimilate versus those who choose not to assimilate, what you have is those who choose not to assimilate seeking to wield political power and social power over this assimilated majority in order to pick people out of that majority and take this majority and wield them against this majority so that both sides can push them down. And that's ultimately what the left really wants. This is why they say, even though they have all of these political victories, even though they can own entire areas like California for 20 years, they still make the claim that they don't have enough political power when they influence everything down to our culture and our media. I was inundated with this propaganda my whole life. And I had to actually change and choose to live a different life in order to see something different. Man, is it messed up. So if you think about it, the one thing that is based on overt, politically neutral evidence is this fact. Minorities are the primary base of the Democratic Party. They are the sole rulers of majority migrant cities and receive funding, votes, and protest support to aid Democrats uniquely. Thus, the issue faced and needing discussion is that of colonialism, not racism. Definitions matter, and they help sort through the obvious emotional appeals, such as the ones being made when you're called a racist or a race traitor. Now, colonialism is the policy or practice of acquiring full or partial political control over another country, occupying it with settlers, and exploiting it economically. Is this what Trump supporters are advocating for? Because obviously, if we were racist, you would think we'd be colonialists. I mean, this is probably the rebuttal that I imagine the first people I know on the left would say. Oh, but colonialism is something done by racists. Well, actually, Rome happened to be a very mixed race population, and they were very colonialist. That's how they became mixed race. They would take over large groups of people, forcefully transfer them into other populations, use them for wielding political control, and then they had a monopoly on a multitude of races without ever giving any respect to those races as real people. Instead, they were just groups to be taken advantage of because they're shared traits based off genetic ties. So again, considering how politically informed we all are into racism, if we know how colonialists or colonizers assaulted local populations or tribes, we knew that they would buy off leaders' emergence, they would take the ports and infrastructure, they'd ferment and turn the local population against one another, and they'd use this to install puppet leaders loyal to their nation's intentions. This is how the British would take over large amounts of populations in Africa. Now, asking ourselves, to be honest, which side, again, is actually arguing with facts and clear explanations alongside a commitment to actions and beliefs that doesn't give them PR? I would think it's the right. Which side religiously pursues and demonizes others just based on public reception and opinion? I think it's the left. Which side can do no wrong and must always save face by pointing to the endless flaws of their evil, unchanging, heartless, National Republic preferring opponents? I think it's the left. I believe that the left are saboteurs. Sabotage is deliberate action aimed at weakening a policy, effort, or organization through subversion, obstruction, disruption, or destruction. And this is everything that the left uses against not just the right, but against America. They are anti-Americans. Now they use Americans to push their agenda. They are largely anti-American. Now, one who engages in sabotage is a saboteur. Saboteurs typically try to conceal their identities because of the consequences of their actions. I stand that there is very open, legitimate evidence and open admittance by Democratic leaders that this is their intention. AOC, right up to Nancy Pelosi, right down to Maxine Waters. Others hint at it with their dismissal or their highlights of our history in order to propagandize the worst aspects of it, like Obama, like Joe Biden, like Bill Clinton, like Hillary Clinton. That's a form of dehumanization. They deprive of human qualities or attributes. They divest of individuality. They remove the identity of an entire group of people in an entire nation by judging it based off the flaws of people who do not exist anymore. Now, of course, dehumanization exists on both sides of the coin, right, left, and right, Republican and Democrat. And it's unforgivable. It distracts us, it ruins our ability to form compromises that are based off of true beneficial means of moving forward and progressing towards better human freedom and better human, not longevity, but better human suffrage. No, better human Yeah, whatever. Better human progress. Let's just stick with that. But yeah, it's unforgivable. Yet only one side pretends to care, and it uses it as a platform. It uses human lives and decency as a weapon of political and economic and social control. That is disgusting, especially when they're the same to demonize the others and deprive them of their identity, culture, and possessions through force, shame, and proactive outrage. Because that's all the left uses in order to push their agenda and to gain political power. They demonize and slander entire groups of people and entire organizations until that organization is so hated and despised and distrusted that nobody gives them validity. And that's evil, just down to its roots. For a minority to create a minority out of a majority just to see its influence over them, that is a form of racism protected only because you have multiple races of different races, creeds, and nationalities joining together against one group and their heritage and social, political, and economic freedoms and protections. When the left believes in whitewashing and of self-hating, pro-oppressive minorities on the right and treat these people as race traitors, yet they preach this propaganda. Yet they don't realize this is what they themselves are. They are racist. They reject others and despise others ultimately for being supportive of assimilating two cultures into one, while they introduce culture replacing the native culture. AKA, because we want people to come here and just want to be like us because they came here to join us. We're the assholes. That's evil. That's evil. You're basically approving of bullying people just because you think you have a right to revenge. That is at least where my empathy is derived on this issue. A reasonable reflection on history and a firm knowledge that two wrongs don't create right. It only serves to reduce progress and prolong the unnecessary suffering of both groups. Martin Luther King promoted and encouraged us to become one people and one race under the Constitution and the history of the nation. Webb Du Bois spoke of us, both African Americans, but of all people, to never forget such things like the Civil War and the death toll that it took in order to free us from ourselves in a way, and of our need to leave the past and quickly take our places as peers and not rivals. We are not rivals as blacks with the white man. We as white men should not be forced to be rivals with Hispanics. Hispanics shouldn't feel like they have to come into another nation and rival those people. And the only people who are generating this rivalry are the left. I stand to agree that any group that promotes competition between individuals based on their race or culture is racist, especially if they promote legislation that reduces the freedoms of one race to uplift the other. That is the left. Likely isn't a popular notion, but standards belong in your head, expressed by both your left and your right hand. I believe it is stupid to ignore your head, to lie down on your hand, and lie down on your hands and not use them, or even just use one hand and we'll tie the other one behind your back just because you favor one hand or the right, or you just can't make a decision. You can use both hands, thanks to this head, to pick things up and build new creations. You can build better things in the world if you're not stuck to the left-right paradigm. If you're on the right, you're probably missing something from the left, even though they're stupid right now. Study those on the left who are older. Study those on the left who existed before this time. And maybe you can start seeing both the evil that they've been slowly working into us. But more importantly, you start seeing the creativity, ingenuity, and the deviousness of their educational program, really, in order to have political reform and legislative reform. They're geniuses at that. But at the same time, they're not good at actually taking care of society. And that's something I had to learn the hard way after supporting Democrats my whole life. I realized they don't actually help the communities they're in. They don't. They don't. California is worse off now than it was before I was born. When I was a child, this land was a much better place. Now it's just nothing but suffering. People just suffer around here every damn day. And yeah, the suffering existed before, but it may have been hidden or something before. But you want to know something? I just genuinely think that it wasn't there before. I don't think it was there before. Freedom. It's important. It is the absolutely most important thing that God has given us is the freedom to glorify Him with our lives and to not have other men tell us how to glorify Him, how to be glorified by Him and His blessings in our life. So much time is wasted by us squandering ourselves and wasting our resources and wasting our time and reducing ourselves to nothing but flesh and rot. Don't be used for your identity. Don't be used for your creed or your image or your heritage. Be used because you care and you feel like what's happening is right. Not because it should be right, not because it has to be right or else you're evil, but because you see this and you know that if you make this choice, something better will happen. Progress is achieved not through empathy, but through understanding. Empathy is a tool of understanding. Empathy alone is not understanding. You have to integrate it into a better system through logic, through information. Just because somebody tells me a story doesn't mean I can't. Just because somebody tells me a story, and I know that because of their character, they're most likely slandering and or not necessarily telling me the truth, because they're telling me only their side of things. But I know for a fact that I can still empathize with them. But that doesn't mean I can help them. I have to get them to see reality. I get them to see reality by understanding through empathy the differences between their reality, and the reality that needs to be created between the two. That's all, everybody. Hey, I'm